Hey Divination, thank you for joining us in this tutorial where I will be showing you how to add subtle and animated shapes to your Divi website using Divi's built-in options only. So without any further ado, let's get to it. Now, before we dive into the tutorial, let's take a quick look at the subtle yet animated shapes that we'll create using this layout. And this is the first one that you can see. So this is what it looks like once you have it all completed. And then we have the second one over here as well. And then let's scroll down. We've added some subtle yet animated shapes to the page as well, such as these squares that you can see in these other ones as well. All right, so we're going to start off by creating a new page and giving our page a title. Then we're going to publish the page. And once we do, we're going to enable the Divi Builder and switch over to Visual Builder right away. And once your page loads, go ahead and click on the icon that's located at the bottom of your page. Then click on the plus icon and scroll down your pre-made layouts until you come across the design conference layout. But I can go ahead and just use the home page. So we're just going to use this pre-made layout so we can focus on creating the animated shapes. Right, and once you've uploaded this layout, go ahead and create a new row. This row will need 2 columns. And we're simply going to drag this row to the top of our hero section. And before you start adding any modules to this row, go ahead and open the row settings and move on to the design tab. And according to the placement of your animated shapes, go ahead and choose a row alignment, which is in this case left side. Then open the spacing subcategory and add 0 pixels to all of the custom padding options. This will limit all of the space that gets created by this row. Then go ahead and add a text module to the first column of this row, and this will need to be an empty text module because we're simply going to create a shape out of this text module. So make sure that you leave the content box empty. Then go ahead and scroll down, open the background subcategory and add the following color code as the background color of your text module. And you can find all of the color codes and steps within the blog post, which I've mentioned in the description below. All right, so then move on to the design tab, open the spacing subcategory. And we're going to reduce the space that gets created by using negative top margin and a negative bottom margin. And we're also going to push the shape to the left side by adding 100 pixels to the right side and minus 100 pixels to the left side. Then we'll add some custom padding as well, and this will allow us to create a shape. Then move on to the border subcategory, and we're going to create a circle out of this shape using 500 pixels for each one of the corners. And last but not least, we'll also add our animation using roll as our animation type, loop as the animation repeat. Then we're going to increase the duration. We'll also use 100% for the animation intensity and 100% for the starting opacity as well. And last but not least, we'll use a linear speed curve. And here we have our shape. Now we're going to save ourselves some time and simply clone this row and place it right at the bottom of the hero section. And we're going to create a shape on the opposite side. But first of all, we're going to use right row alignment. So it all depends on where you want your shape to be located within the hero section. And then we'll switch over to wireframe mode and just drag this shape to the second column of this row. And we'll also need to make some small modifications to it. And since we have an animation going on, we're just going to switch over to the wireframe mode to open our settings. Then we'll move on to the design tab. And the first thing we're going to change is the spacing of this animated shape. So we're going to remove the top margin and we're going to push this shape to the right side instead of the left. And we'll also change the bottom margin into minus 350 pixels. And we're also going to use a slightly different shape. And as you can see, this is what we get. And if you want to remove the space on your hero section a little bit more, you can simply remove the padding. So to create the second shape, we're simply going to use the first example and we're going to apply some modifications to it. So open your shape and go to the design tab, then move on to the border subcategory and use 20 pixels instead of 500 pixels for each one of the corners. And we'll also slow down the animated shape a little bit by increasing the animation duration to 100,000. But this all depends on your preferences, so you can actually make them go as fast or slow as you want to by playing around with those values. And I'm going to do the exact same thing for the second shape as well. So I'm going to change the rounded corners into 20 pixels. And again, I'm going to increase the animation duration. All right. So here we have our second result, and let's move on to the third one. And for that, we're going to scroll down our page, and right at the bottom of this section, we're going to add another row. So this time we're going to use 4 columns instead of 2. And before adding any modules to it, we're going to open the row settings, and we want our animated shapes to appear on the left side of a row. That's why we're going to open the design tab, move on to the alignment subcategory and use left row alignment. Then we'll open the spacing subcategory, and again, we're going to make sure that we reduce the row space as much as possible. And we're also going to disable it on phone and tablet because this looks good on desktop, but it's a little bit too busy on phone and tablet. So next we're going to add a text module to our first column. And we're going to leave the content box empty because again, we're going to use this text module to create a shape. Then move on to the spacing subcategory of the design tab, and we're going to reduce the space that's being created by this text module by using minus 150 pixels for the top margin, 25% for the right, minus 50 pixels for the bottom, and minus 25% for the left side, so the object will get pushed to the left side of the screen. And we'll also create our space using 250 pixels for the top padding. Then we'll also add a border to this shape. We'll use 5 pixels for the border width and the following color code for the border color. And we'll also create some depth using the first box shadow option. Now let's move on to the animation subcategory. And again, we're going to add a roll animation, make it loop. And we're going to use 25,000 for our animation duration. We're going to increase the animation intensity to 100% and use 50% for the starting opacity. And last but not least, we'll use linear as our speed curve. All right, so we have our first object over here, and I'm just simply going to drag it to the first column. And I'm going to clone this text module because we're going to have 2 shapes overlapping each other. And I'm going to make some small modifications to it as well. So the first thing I'm going to do is change the spacing subcategory. So I'm going to use minus 50 pixels for the top margin. And I'm going to reduce the space between both sections using minus 200 pixels for the bottom margin. And then I'll open the border subcategory, and I'm going to use another color for this shape. So I'm just going to change the color into the following color code. And last but not least, I'm also going to add an animation delay to this second object. And I'm going to save it. So here we have our third result. Now let's move on to our last example, and for that I'm going to need a row at the beginning of this section, and again I'm going to use 4 columns, and I'm simply going to drag this row to the top. And before adding any modules, I'm going to open the row settings, move on to the design subcategory, and this time I want my shapes to appear on the right side of the screen, so I'm going to use right row alignment. And again I'm going to reduce all of the space that's being created by this row, and I'm going to hide it on phone and tablet. Alright, so now I can start adding my shapes, and again I'm going to use an empty text module for that. And I'm going to add it to the last column of my row, and open the background subcategory of this text module and add a gradient background to it. I've used the following color codes, and I've made no modifications to the default settings of it. Then move on to the design tab, open the spacing subcategory. Again, we're going to use a negative top margin to make sure that the space that's being created between both sections isn't too big. So I'm going to use minus 80% for the top, minus 25% for the right, minus 120 pixels for the bottom, and 25% for the left. And then I'll create my shape using 250 pixels for the top padding. Then I'll open the border subcategory, and I'm going to use some rounded corners of 20 pixels. And to create some depth, I'm going to use the first option of the box shadow subcategory. And last but not least, we'll add our animation. Again, we're using the roll option, and we'll make it loop. And we'll use 25,000 for the animation duration, 100% for the intensity, and 70% for the starting opacity. Last but not least, we'll use linear as the speed curve. Now we can go ahead and clone this shape, and we're going to make some small modifications to it. Starting with the spacing subcategory, we'll change the top margin into minus 50%. And then we'll open the animation subcategory and add a delay of 1000. And here we have the result. So now that we've gone through all of these steps, let's take a final look at the subtle and animated shapes that we've added to this layout. So you can create whichever kind of shape you want and apply this method to your page. And this is the second result that we got. And if we scroll down this page, we'll see that we have some animated squares here as well. And over here at the right side of the screen, we have the last result. Well, that was all for this tutorial. If you liked it, please give it a thumbs up and make sure that you subscribe to all our social media channels so you'll get a notification every time we have something new for you. Thanks for watching, and we look forward to seeing you in our next video.